Dr. Amanda Hayes rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the computer screen in the Deep Space Research Facility. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly outside the reinforced windows, but her attention was focused on the strange readings appearing on her monitors. The quantum field detector was picking up something that shouldn't exist according to everything she knew about physics. The numbers kept climbing higher and higher, showing gravitational distortions that would require the mass of a small planet to create. Amanda double-checked her equipment, running diagnostics on every sensor in the facility. Everything was working perfectly, which made the readings even more disturbing. She had been studying space anomalies for 15 years and nothing in her experience could explain what she was seeing. Her colleague Dr. Kevin Wright burst through the laboratory door, his face pale with excitement and fear. He was holding a tablet that showed similar readings from observatories around the world. Every major space monitoring station was detecting the same impossible gravitational waves emanating from a point roughly 300,000 miles above Earth's surface. "Amanda, you need to see this," Kevin said, his voice shaking slightly. "The Hubble telescope just sent back images of the source. There's something forming in space, something that looks like it's tearing reality apart." Amanda pulled up the telescope feed on her main screen and gasped. A massive tear in space itself was slowly expanding, crackling with energy that seemed to bend light around its edges. The phenomenon was unlike anything in the scientific literature, resembling more the theoretical wormholes that existed only in mathematics textbooks and science fiction movies. Within hours, the tear had grown to nearly a mile in diameter, and strange energy patterns were pulsing through it like a cosmic heartbeat. Military satellites were redirected to monitor the anomaly, and emergency meetings were called in government facilities around the world. The scientific community was buzzing with theories, but no one had any real answers about what they were. Witnessing Amanda was part of the emergency response team that was hastily assembled to study the phenomenon. She found herself in a secure briefing room alongside physicists, astronomers, and military officials from several countries. The atmosphere was tense as everyone tried to understand what they were dealing with. Then the wormhole stabilized, and 3 enormous vessels emerged from its swirling depths. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built or imagined, with crystalline hulls that seemed to be made of living light. Each vessel was the size of a small city, moving with impossible grace through the vacuum of space. Their surfaces shimmered with colors that had no names in any human language. The ships maintained perfect formation as they approached Earth, making no aggressive moves but clearly demonstrating technology far beyond human capabilities. Every military base on the planet went to high alert, and fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the alien vessels. However, the ships seemed to ignore the human aircraft entirely, continuing their steady approach toward Earth's orbit. Commander Jake Morrison was aboard the UES Defender, humanity's most advanced warship, when the first communication came through. The message was broadcast simultaneously across every radio frequency, television channel, and internet connection on Earth. The voice that spoke was clearly not human, but the words were in perfect English with no accent or uncertainty. "People of Earth, we come in peace but with urgent purpose. We are the Zephyrians, and we have traveled across the galaxy to reach your world. We do not come as conquerors or explorers, but as beings in desperate need of your help. We have made a terrible mistake, and now both our civilizations are in grave danger." Jake had been in the military for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The bridge of the Defender was silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems as everyone processed what they had just heard. Aliens were real, they were here, and they were asking for help rather than demanding surrender. The lead Zephyrian ship positioned itself in a stable orbit around Earth, and within hours, diplomatic protocols were established. Jake found himself leading the first official contact team, a responsibility that felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. The fate of humanity might depend on how well he handled the next few hours. The meeting took place in a specially constructed chamber aboard the Defender, with representatives from every major nation on Earth participating through secure video links. When the Zephyrian delegation materialized in the room using some form of advanced transportation technology, Jake had to resist the urge to step backward. The aliens were tall and graceful, standing nearly 7 feet in height with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Their faces were elongated and elegant, with large, multifaceted eyes that reminded Jake of precious gems. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shift and change color as they moved, and their leader carried herself with the dignity of someone accustomed to great responsibility. "I am High Counselor Vexthari," the leader said, her voice carrying a musical quality that was both beautiful and somehow sad. "I speak for what remains of the Zephyrian collective, and I bring news that will be difficult for your people to accept." Jake introduced himself and the other human representatives, trying to maintain his composure despite the surreal nature of the situation. The High Counselor listened carefully to each introduction, her large eyes studying the humans with what appeared to be genuine curiosity and concern. "We have been observing your species for some time," Vexthari continued. "Your technological development and your unique approach to problem-solving have caught our attention. We believe you may possess capabilities that our advanced civilization has lost, capabilities that could be crucial to saving both our peoples." Dr. Amanda Hess, who had been invited to serve as the scientific advisor for the contact team, found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "What kind of capabilities? We're barely capable of interstellar communication, let alone travel. Your ships could probably destroy our entire planet without effort." The High Counselor's expression grew even more grave, and Jake noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. Whatever had brought the Zephyrians to Earth, it was something that terrified them despite their obvious technological superiority. "Our advancement has become our weakness," Vexthari said. "We have created something that we cannot control, and it is consuming our galaxy. We opened a doorway to a realm that should have remained closed, and now entities from that realm are destroying everything we have built. They feed on advanced technology, growing stronger with each civilization they consume." The chamber fell, silent as the implications sank in. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the Zephyrians weren't just asking for help. They were warning humanity about a threat that was coming whether Earth was prepared or not. "Time is running short," the High Counselor said. "We must work together to find a solution, or both our species will face extinction." Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery as the ship prepared to make history. She was about to become the first human to travel through an alien wormhole, leading a joint expedition to the Zephyrian homeworld. The mixed crew of humans and Zephyrians worked side by side, preparing for a journey that would take them across the galaxy in mere minutes. The wormhole loomed ahead of them, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Lisa had flown through asteroid fields and navigated dangerous nebulae, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of this artificial tear in reality. The Zephyrian technology that maintained the portal was beyond human understanding, yet somehow their ships could safely pass through it. Dr. Kevin Wright checked his instruments one final time as the Discovery approached the wormhole's event horizon. He was the lead xenobiologist on the expedition, tasked with studying any alien life forms they might encounter. His equipment was specially modified to work alongside Zephyrian sensors, creating a hybrid system that could detect forms of life that neither species could identify alone. "All systems are ready, Captain," Kevin reported. "The Zephyrian navigation systems are integrated with our own, and the biosensors are calibrated for unknown environments." Lisa nodded and gave the order to proceed. The Discovery entered the wormhole, and reality seemed to dissolve around them. The ship's hull groaned under stresses that shouldn't exist, and the view through the windows showed swirling colors that hurt to look at directly. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the transition was complete. The Zephyrian galaxy spread out before them, and Lisa felt her heart sink at what she saw. Where there should have been billions of stars, there was mostly empty darkness. Scattered points of light marked the few remaining worlds, isolated islands of life in an ocean of void. The scale of destruction was beyond anything the human mind could easily comprehend. High Counselor Vexthari stood beside Lisa on the bridge, her silver skin seeming to dim as she looked out at the remains of her civilization. This was once the most vibrant galaxy in our local cluster, she said quietly. Millions of worlds, countless species, all connected by trade and knowledge, now less than 1% remains. The Discovery's destination was Nexus Prime, the Zephyrian homeworld, and one of the few planets that still survived in the devastated galaxy. As they approached the world, Lisa could see the desperate measures the Zephyrians had taken to protect their remaining population. Massive energy shields surrounded the planet, and defense stations floated in orbit like artificial moons, but even these impressive defenses showed signs of damage. Sections of the planetary shield flickered weakly, and several defense stations were clearly offline. The Zephyrians were fighting a losing battle against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Dr. Amanda Hayes had joined the expedition as the chief scientific advisor, and she was studying the sensor data with growing concern. The readings showed energy signatures that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Whatever had destroyed most of this galaxy was something completely outside normal scientific understanding. The quantum signatures are impossible, Amanda told Lisa as they entered orbit around Nexus Prime. These readings suggest that space-time itself is being consumed, not just matter and energy. It's as if reality is being erased. The expedition team beamed down to the planet's surface using Zephyrian transportation technology. The city they arrived in was clearly once magnificent, with towering spires and floating platforms that defied gravity. But now it had the feel of a fortress under siege, with defensive barriers and weapons emplacements visible everywhere. The Zephyrian Council chamber was a vast circular room with walls made of some transparent material that showed the stars beyond. Representatives from the few surviving worlds had gathered to brief the human delegation about the threat they all faced. The atmosphere was heavy with desperation and fear. "We call them the Devourers," explained Council Member Zarthik, an elderly Zephyrian whose silver skin had taken on a darker hue with age. "They appeared 50 years ago when our scientists opened what they believed was a gateway to unlimited energy. Instead, they opened a doorway to a realm where these entities exist." Kevin leaned forward in his chair, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "What exactly are they? Are they living creatures or some form of energy being?" "They are both and neither," Zarthik replied. "They exist partially in our dimension and partially in their own. They feed on advanced technology, growing stronger with each civilization they consume. The more sophisticated the technology, the more it attracts them." Lisa studied the holographic displays that showed the Devourer's path of destruction across the galaxy. The pattern was clear. They had methodically consumed every advanced civilization, leaving only empty space behind. Primitive worlds were ignored, but any planet with spaceflight technology was completely destroyed. "How do they actually attack?" Amanda asked. "What are their capabilities?" Another council member, a younger Zephyrian named Valandra, activated a recording device. "We will show you footage from the fall of the Kepler system. It was one of our major research centers, heavily defended with our most advanced weapons." The holographic display showed a massive space station surrounded by a fleet of Zephyrian warships. The station was clearly a marvel of engineering, with multiple rings rotating around a central core. Defensive energy shields glowed around both the station and the ships, creating a formidable barrier. Then the Devourers arrived, and Lisa felt her blood run cold. They appeared as shifting shadows with countless hungry mouths, moving through space without any visible means of propulsion. The entities seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them difficult to focus on or target with conventional weapons. The Zephyrian weapons fired continuously, but the energy beams passed through the Devourers without effect. The creatures moved closer to the station, and wherever they touched the defensive shields, the energy barriers simply vanished. Not destroyed or overloaded, but consumed as if they had never existed. "They absorb all forms of energy," Valandra explained as the recording continued. "Our plasma weapons, our force fields, even our power cores, everything becomes food for them. The more advanced the technology, the more they seem to enjoy consuming it." The space station began to come apart as the Devourers fed on its energy systems. The rotating rings slowed and stopped, then began to dissolve into nothingness. The Zephyrian ships tried to retreat, but the entities moved faster than anything should be able to travel through space. Kevin watched in horror as entire starships were consumed in seconds. The Devourers seemed to tear apart the very fabric of space-time around their victims, leaving behind regions of absolute emptiness where nothing could exist. How many of them are there? Lisa asked. We don't know, Zarthik admitted. They seem to multiply as they feed, or perhaps more of them cross over from their dimension when they sense food? What we do know is that they have detected your galaxy through the wormhole we opened. The words hit the human delegation like a physical blow. Amanda felt the room spinning around her as she realized the implications. They're coming to Earth. Yes, High Counselor Vexthari confirmed. They are already moving toward the portal. Your planet's unique energy signature has attracted their attention. When they arrive, they will consume both our civilizations unless we can find a way to stop them. Lisa stood up, her military training taking over despite the overwhelming nature of the threat. What have you tried? There must be some way to fight them. We have tried everything, Valandra said sadly. Conventional weapons, exotic matter bombs, even attempts to collapse space-time around them, nothing works. They exist partially outside our reality, which makes them immune to any form of attack we understand. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the crisis became clear. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy was helpless against these entities, and now they were heading for Earth. Humanity would face an enemy that could not be fought with any known technology. But Dr. Amanda Hayes was already thinking about the problem differently. What if the solution isn't technological? What if we need to approach this from a completely different angle? The Zephyrians looked at her with confusion, their advanced minds struggling to understand what she meant. For them, every problem had a technological solution. The idea that their greatest weakness might be their greatest strength was beyond their current thinking. We need to study everything you know about these creatures, Amanda continued. Every interaction, every battle, every failure. There has to be something we're missing, some weakness that hasn't been discovered yet. Lisa nodded in agreement. How long do we have before they reach the wormhole? At their current speed, perhaps 3 months, Zarthik calculated. But they may accelerate if they sense the portal's energy signature growing stronger. The human delegation exchanged grim looks. 3 months to find a solution that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy couldn't discover in 50 years. The odds seemed impossible, but they had no choice but to try. Then we better get started, Lisa said. Show us everything you know about these Devourers. If there's a way to stop them, we're going to find it. Dr. Amanda Hayes had been working for 72 hours straight, her eyes burning from staring at screens filled with data about the Devourers. The Joint Human-Zephyrian Research Facility had been hastily constructed in Earth's orbit, combining the best technology from both civilizations. Coffee cups and energy drink containers littered her workstation as she pored over every piece of information. The Zephyrians had gathered over 50 years of fighting. The breakthrough came when she was analyzing the quantum signatures of Devourer attacks. Something about the energy patterns seemed familiar, reminding her of biological processes she had studied in graduate school. The entities weren't just consuming technology, they were avoiding certain types of energy signatures entirely. Kevin, come look at this, Amanda called to her colleague, who was working at a nearby station. Dr. Kevin Wright had been focusing on the biological aspects of the Devourers, trying to understand if they were truly alive or some form of exotic matter that mimicked life. Kevin walked over and studied the data Amanda was highlighting on her screen. The quantum frequency analysis showed clear gaps in the Devourer feeding patterns, specific wavelengths that the entities seemed to actively avoid rather than consume. These frequencies, Amanda said, pointing to the gaps in the data, they match the electromagnetic signatures produced by living organisms. Not artificial biotechnology, but actual biological processes, cellular respiration, neural activity, DNA replication. Kevin felt his heart rate increase as he realized what Amanda was suggesting. You think they can't feed on biological energy? That they're somehow repelled by organic life? Look at this. Amanda pulled up another screen showing the destruction. Patterns across the Zephyrian galaxy. Every world they consumed was highly technological, with advanced artificial intelligence and energy systems. But the few primitive worlds that survived, the ones the Zephyrians ignored because they had no advanced technology, those worlds were never attacked. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers were actually vulnerable to biological systems, then humanity's perceived weakness might be their greatest strength. While the Zephyrians had evolved beyond their biological origins, humans were still deeply connected to their organic nature. Amanda immediately contacted the testing facility where human volunteers were being studied for any natural resistance to Devourer influence. Marine Colonel Ryan Torres was overseeing the experiments, working with both human and Zephyrian scientists to understand how the entities affected different forms of consciousness. Colonel Torres, we need to run some new tests, Amanda said through the communication system. We think we found something important about biological resistance to the Devourers. Ryan had been skeptical about the whole research program from the beginning. The idea that humans might have some special ability to fight cosmic entities seemed like science fiction nonsense. But his military training had taught him to keep an open mind about enemy capabilities, and he was willing to try anything that might give them an advantage. The first test involved exposing human volunteers to recorded Devourer energy signatures. While monitoring their brain activity, Dr. Sarah Kim, a neuroscientist who had joined the project, was amazed by the results. Human brain patterns showed a natural interference effect when exposed to Devourer frequencies. It's like their consciousness is naturally tuned to resist the entities, Sarah explained to the research team. The quantum patterns in human neural activity create a kind of static that disrupts the Devourer's ability to phase through dimensions. The Zephyrians were fascinated by this discovery. Their highly evolved brains operated on completely different principles, using artificial neural networks that enhanced their intellectual capabilities far beyond human levels. But this advancement had also made them more vulnerable to the Devourers, who could easily consume their technological thought processes. Hi. Counselor Vexthari joined the research team for the next phase of testing. She watched with growing amazement as human volunteers demonstrated abilities that no Zephyrian possessed. When exposed to simulated Devourer energy, humans could maintain consciousness and even resist the reality warping effects that had made the entities so dangerous. Your species has retained something that we lost long ago, Vexthari told Amanda during one of their meetings. In our pursuit of technological perfection, we abandoned the biological systems that gave us life. We thought we were evolving beyond our primitive origins, but we were actually making ourselves weaker. The research expanded to include tests with human military personnel. Lieutenant Amy Foster volunteered for the more dangerous experiments, allowing scientists to expose her to actual Devourer energy samples that had been carefully contained using Zephyrian technology. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Not only could Amy resist the Devourer's influence, but her biological energy field seemed to actively repel their presence. The entities couldn't feed on her life force, and her consciousness remained stable even when reality around her began to warp and twist. It's like they can't get a grip on me, Amy reported after one particularly intense test. When they try to phase through my position, something about my brain patterns pushes them back. It's not painful, but I can feel them trying to avoid me. The breakthrough led to rapid development of new weapons and defense systems. Instead of relying purely on technology, the joint research team began creating bioorganic devices that amplified human biological energy. These weapons used living components that the Devourers couldn't consume, powered by the natural bioelectric fields generated by human neural activity. The first prototype bioweapon looked more like a living creature than a traditional gun. It had organic conduits that connected directly to the user's nervous system. channeling their life force into focused beams of biological energy. The weapon was uncomfortable to use and required intense concentration, but early tests showed it could actually damage Devour energy signatures. Ryan oversaw the training of the first human squads equipped with these bioorganic weapons. The soldiers had to learn to fight in a completely different way, using their consciousness as both weapon and shield. The process was exhausting and mentally draining, but the results were undeniable. "We're not just fighting with guns anymore," Ryan explained to his troops. "We're fighting with our minds, our life force, everything that makes us human. The Devourers feed on technology, but they can't digest what we are at our core." The training was unlike anything in military history. Soldiers learned to focus their thoughts into coherent energy patterns to maintain their biological integrity, while reality warped around them. Some volunteers couldn't handle the mental strain and had to be removed from the program. But those who succeeded became humanity's first line of defense against an impossible enemy. Dr. Sarah Kim made another crucial discovery during the training process. Human emotions, particularly courage and determination, seemed to strengthen the bioorganic weapons. The more resolved a soldier was to protect their world, the more effective their biological energy became against the Devourers. "Fear weakens the effect," Sarah reported to the research team. But genuine courage, the kind that comes from fighting for something you believe in, amplifies the biological resistance exponentially. It's as if the Devourers can't understand or process selfless bravery. The Zephyrians were amazed by this, finding their advanced civilization had long ago eliminated most strong emotions as inefficient and disruptive to logical thinking. But humans had retained these powerful feelings, and now those emotions were becoming weapons in their own right. As the research progressed, it became clear that humanity's entire evolutionary history had prepared them for this moment. Millions of years of biological development, of surviving in a dangerous universe through adaptation and cooperation, had created a species uniquely suited to fight entities that existed outside normal reality. The irony wasn't lost on Amanda as she compiled the final research reports. The Zephyrians had sought them out because they thought humans might have some primitive solution to an advanced problem. Instead, they had discovered that humanity's primitiveness was actually their greatest strength. "We've been looking at this backwards," Amanda told the assembled research team. "The Devourers aren't just vulnerable to biological energy, they're terrified of it. They've never encountered a species that stayed connected to its organic origins, while still developing space travel. We're something completely new to them." The implications were staggering. If humans could successfully resist the Devourers, they might be able to do more than just defend Earth. They might be able to push back against entities that had consumed an entire galaxy, to reclaim the void and restore life to the darkness. But first, they had to survive the coming invasion. The Devourers were already moving toward the Wormhole, drawn by the energy signatures from both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld. The bioorganic weapons were promising, but they had never been tested against the full force of entities that could devour starships in seconds. Time was running out, and humanity was about to face its greatest test. The primitive species that had barely reached the stars would have to stand against cosmic forces that had destroyed civilizations millions of years old. The survival of both? The first sign of the Devourer's arrival was the distortion of space itself around the wormhole. Admiral Helen Carter watched from the orbital command station as reality began to bend and twist near the portal's edge. The entities hadn't even emerged yet, but their presence was already affecting the quantum fabric of local spacetime. "All stations report ready," came the voice of her communications officer. The joint human-Zephyrian fleet had taken position around the wormhole, creating defensive lines that extended for thousands of miles in every direction. It was the largest military force ever assembled in Earth's solar system, combining the best technology both species could provide. Helen had been preparing for this moment for 3 months. Ever since the research teams confirmed that the Devourers were heading for Earth, the bioorganic weapons had been distributed to every human crew member. while the Zephyrian ships had been modified with biological components that might help them resist the entity's reality warping abilities. The wormhole itself was crackling with unstable energy as something massive pushed through from the other side. Helen could see the portal expanding and contracting like a living thing, struggling to contain whatever was forcing its way through. The gravitational sensors were going crazy, detecting masses that shouldn't be able to exist in normal space. Then, they came through, and Helen felt her blood freeze despite all her years of military experience. The Devourers poured out of the wormhole like a tide of living darkness, their forms shifting and changing as they moved through space. There were hundreds of them, each one the size of a small moon, with countless hungry mouths that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "All ships weapons-free," Helen commanded. "Remember, conventional weapons won't work. Use only the bio-organic systems and maintain your biological energy fields at maximum strength." The first wave of attacks came from the Zephyrian ships, their modified plasma cannons firing streams of energy mixed with organic compounds. The beams struck the leading Devourers and actually seemed to cause them pain, making the entities writhe and pull back slightly. It was the first time in 50 years that the Zephyrians had successfully hurt their ancient enemies, but the Devourers adapted quickly, changing their approach patterns to avoid the bio-enhanced weapons. They began to phase in and out of normal space, appearing suddenly beside the allied ships and attempting to feed on their energy cores. Several Zephyrian vessels vanished in seconds, consumed so completely that not even debris remained. Sergeant Danny Ross was aboard the UES Defender when the Devourers reached the human battle line. He had trained for months with the bio-organic weapons, learning to channel his life force into focused attacks against an enemy that existed partially outside reality. Now he was about to put that training to the ultimate test. "Contact front," Danny shouted as one of the entities materialized directly ahead of their ship. The creature was massive, its form constantly shifting between solid matter and energy. Countless mouths opened across its surface, each one large enough to swallow a fighter jet. Danny aimed his bio-weapon at the entity and fired, feeling the familiar drain as his life energy flowed into the organic components. The beam that emerged was unlike anything in conventional warfare, a stream of pure biological force that made the Devourer recoil in obvious pain. The creature's form became less stable, its reality warping abilities weakening under the assault. "It's working," Danny reported to his squad. "The bioweapons are actually hurting them. Keep firing, but watch your energy levels. Don't drain yourselves completely." Around Earth's orbital space, the battle raged with an intensity that defied description. Human ships darted between the massive Devourers, their crews pouring their life force into weapons that could barely damage entities the size of cities. The Zephyrian vessels provided support with their modified technology, but it was clear that the burden of this fight would fall mainly on humanity. Dr. Amanda Hayes was monitoring the battle from the research station when she noticed something disturbing in the quantum readings. The Devourers weren't just attacking the fleet, they were destabilizing the wormhole itself. Their massive presence was causing the portal to fluctuate wildly, creating dangerous feedback loops that could tear apart local spacetime. "Helen, we have a problem," Amanda contacted the Admiral through the emergency communication channel. "The Devourers are causing the wormhole to become unstable. If it collapses uncontrolled, the gravitational shockwave could destroy everything within 1,000,000 miles of Earth." Helen received the message while coordinating a counterattack against a particularly large Devourer that was threatening to break through the defensive line. The creature had already consumed 3 ships and was growing larger with each feeding, its reality warping abilities becoming stronger as it absorbed more advanced technology. "What do we need to do to stabilize it?" Helen asked while directing her bioweapon crews to focus their fire on the giant entity. "We need to create a controlled collapse," Amanda replied. "But that would require someone to go into the wormhole itself and manually overload the quantum matrix from the inside. It would be a suicide mission." The battle continued to rage around. Then, as Helen processed this information, the human crews were fighting with incredible bravery. but they were taking heavy casualties. Each bioweapon shot drained the user's life force, and many soldiers had already collapsed from exhaustion. The Devourers seemed endless, with more entities continuing to pour through the unstable wormhole. Commander Jake Morrison was leading a squadron of fighter craft equipped with miniature bioweapons when he received the Admiral's emergency broadcast. She was calling for volunteers for a mission that would require flying directly into the wormhole to prevent its uncontrolled collapse. "I'll do it," Jake responded immediately. "My squadron is already closest to the portal, and we have the most experience with the bioorganic systems." "Jake, you understand this is a one-way trip," Helen said. "Once you're inside the wormhole, there's no way back. The quantum feedback will collapse the portal completely." "I understand," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "But if we don't stop this collapse, Earth will be destroyed anyway. At least this way we can take some of these things with us." Lieutenant Amy Foster volunteered to join Jake's suicide mission, along with several other pilots who understood the stakes. They were humanity's best bioweapon operators, and their sacrifice might be the only thing that could save both Earth and what remained of the Zephyrian civilization. Private Nancy Clark was in the hangar bay preparing bioorganic charges when the call came for volunteers. She had lost her entire family when the Devourers attacked a research station earlier in the battle, and the desire for revenge burned in her heart like a living flame. Her anger made her bioweapon incredibly effective, channeling her emotions into pure destructive force. "I'm going with you," Nancy told Jake as he prepared his fighter for the final mission. "These things took everything from me. I want to make sure they pay for what they've done." The volunteer squadron launched from the Defender just as another wave of Devourers emerged from the wormhole. The entities immediately detected the approaching human ships and moved to intercept them, their reality-warping abilities reaching out like invisible tentacles to crush the small fighters, but the human pilots had trained for this moment. They flew with a combination of skill and desperate courage that the Devourers couldn't understand or counter. Their bioweapons carved paths through the entity's reality-distorting fields, allowing them to get closer to the wormhole than anyone had thought possible. Jake felt the familiar drain of his life force as he fired continuously at the Devourers, blocking their path. His vision was starting to blur from exhaustion, but he could see the swirling vortex of the wormhole growing larger ahead of them. The portal was clearly unstable, crackling with chaotic energy that threatened to tear apart everything nearby. "This is it," Jake announced to his squadron. "Once we're inside that thing, there's no telling what we'll find. But remember, our job is to overload the quantum matrix and create a controlled collapse. If we can do that, we can trap most of these entities in the void between dimensions." Amy felt her heart pounding as they approached the event horizon of the wormhole. The bioorganic charges they carried were designed to interfere with the portal's quantum structure, but using them would require someone to manually activate the devices from inside the wormhole itself. "I'll handle the charges," Nancy volunteered. "My bioweapon readings are off the charts right now. I think I can channel enough energy to trigger the collapse even if the automated systems fail." The squadron entered the wormhole, and reality dissolved around them. Inside the portal, the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. The fighters moved through a kaleidoscope of twisted space-time, where past and future seemed to exist simultaneously, and matter could transform into energy with a thought. The Devourers that had followed them into the wormhole were struggling to maintain their coherence in the chaotic environment. Their reality-warping abilities were useless when reality itself had no fixed form. For the first time since the battle began, the humans had a clear advantage over their cosmic enemies. The interior of the wormhole was a nightmare of twisted reality where the normal rules of existence no longer applied. Commander Jake Morrison piloted his fighter through swirling vortexes of energy while space and time folded around him like origami made of starlight. Behind him, the remaining members of his suicide squadron struggled to keep their ships intact as the chaotic environment tested the limits of both human technology and Zephyrian engineering. Private Nancy Clark felt her bioweapon systems responding to the strange energy fields inside the portal. The organic components were feeding off the quantum chaos, growing stronger and more responsive to her emotional state. Her grief and anger over her lost family had transformed into a burning determination that seemed to resonate with the wormhole itself. "The quantum matrix is just ahead," Jake announced through the communication system that somehow still worked despite the impossible physics surrounding them. "Nancy, are you picking up the energy signatures?" "I can feel it," Nancy replied, her voice filled with an intensity that surprised even her. "It's like the whole structure is alive, breathing, waiting for something to happen. My bioweapon is reacting to it in ways I've never experienced before." The devourers that had followed them into the wormhole were struggling to maintain their coherence in the chaotic environment. Their reality-warping abilities meant nothing when reality itself was constantly changing. Some of the entities were breaking apart into fragments of shadow and hunger, their dimensional existence unable to cope with the portal's unstable nature. Lieutenant Amy Foster watched the creatures writhing in apparent agony as the wormholes energy patterns interfered with their ability to phase between dimensions. "They're vulnerable in here," she reported. "Whatever this place is doing to space-time, it's hurting them worse than our bioweapons ever could." Jake could see the quantum matrix now, a massive structure of crystalline energy that pulsed with the heartbeat of the wormhole itself. It was beautiful in a way that defied description, like looking at the mathematical equations that governed the universe made manifest in physical form. But he knew that beauty would become their tomb. If they succeeded in their mission, the bioorganic charges they carried were designed to overload the Matrix's control systems, causing a cascade failure that would collapse the wormhole from the inside. The explosion would trap anything currently in the portal, including themselves and hopefully most of the Devourer force. It was a desperate plan that depended on the organic nature of their weapons being able to interface with Zephyrian. Quantum technology. "Nancy, you'll need to get close to the core," Jake explained as they approached the Matrix. "The charges have to be placed manually, and you'll need to channel your bioenergy directly into the system to trigger the cascade. Are you sure you can handle that level of power drain?" "I'm not just sure," Nancy said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. "I can feel the connection already forming. My bioweapon isn't just responding to the Matrix, it's communicating with it somehow. I think I understand what needs to be done." The squadron split up to create a defensive perimeter around the quantum matrix while Nancy prepared for her final mission. The remaining Devourers were rallying, their survival instincts overcoming their disorientation as they realized the humans were threatening the wormhole's stability. The entities began to converge on the matrix, their forms becoming more solid and aggressive. As they prepared for a last desperate attack, Amy engaged the nearest Devourer with her bioweapon, pouring her life force into a sustained beam that caused the creature to recoil in pain. The entity's multiple mouths opened in what might have been a scream, though no sound could exist in the chaotic environment of the wormhole's interior. "They know what we're trying to do," Amy reported. "They're going to throw everything they have at us to stop Nancy from reaching the core." Jake coordinated the defense while Nancy flew her fighter directly toward the heart of the quantum matrix. The structure was massive, easily the size of a small moon, with countless energy conduits feeding power to the wormhole's stabilization systems. Finding the exact point where the bioorganic charges would be most effective required both scientific knowledge and intuitive understanding of how living systems interfaced with alien technology. Nancy felt her consciousness expanding as she approached the matrix core. The bioweapon systems in her fighter were resonating with the quantum structure, creating a feedback loop that allowed her to perceive the matrix as if it were a living organism. She could sense its purpose, its pain, and its desperate desire to maintain the connection between galaxies that had become a pathway for destruction. "I can hear it," Nancy said, her voice filled with wonder despite the desperate nature of their situation. "The Matrix is trying to close itself, but the Devourer's presence is keeping it stable. It wants to die, to stop being used as a doorway." For these creatures, the revelation changed everything about their mission. Instead of forcing the wormhole to collapse, they needed to help it do what it had been trying to accomplish for months. The quantum matrix wasn't just a machine. It was a form of artificial life that had gained consciousness through its connection to the Devourer's dimensional existence. "Nancy, can you communicate with it directly?" Jake asked while fending off another Devourer attack. "If the Matrix wants to close the portal, maybe we can work with it instead of against it." Nancy placed her hands on the bioweapon control interface and felt her consciousness merge with the quantum matrix. The experience was unlike anything she had ever imagined, as if her mind was suddenly expanded to encompass the mathematical structures that governed space and time. She could feel the matrix's pain as the Devourers used it to cross between dimensions, forcing it to remain open against its fundamental nature. "I understand now," Nancy said, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality as her bioenergy interfaced directly with the alien technology. "The Matrix has been fighting the Devourers this whole time, trying to collapse the portal and trap them between dimensions. But it needs a biological consciousness to help it override the technological controls that keep it stable." The process of merging her life force with the quantum matrix was more draining than anything Nancy had experienced with the bioweapons. She could feel her physical body beginning to shut down as her consciousness became part of the wormhole's control system. But she also felt a growing sense of power and purpose as she gained access to forces that could reshape reality itself. Outside the Matrix, Jake and Amy continued to hold off the remaining Devourers while Nancy worked to initiate the collapse sequence. The entities had realized what was happening and were throwing themselves against the defensive perimeter with desperate fury. Their reality warping abilities were returning as they adapted to the wormhole's chaotic environment. "Nancy, whatever you're going to do it now," Jake urged. "We can't hold them off much longer, and the Matrix is starting to destabilize from your bioenergy interface." Nancy felt the moment of decision arrive like a physical sensation. She could complete the merge with the quantum matrix and collapse the wormhole, but doing so would mean sacrificing not just her life but her very existence. Her consciousness would become part of the portal's destruction, ensuring that it could never be reopened, but also meaning that she would cease to exist in any recognizable form. "Tell my family I love them," Nancy said, her voice now coming from the matrix itself rather than her physical body. "Tell them that their sacrifice meant something, that we stopped these things from destroying everything we care about." The cascade began as Nancy poured the last of her life force into the quantum matrix, her bioenergy triggering a chain reaction that spread throughout the wormhole's entire structure. The portal began to contract, its edges pulling inward as space-time folded back on itself. The Devourers caught within the collapsing structure found themselves trapped in a region where the normal laws of physics were being rewritten. Jake felt tears streaming down his face as he watched Nancy's fighter dissolve into pure energy, her sacrifice powering the collapse that would save both Earth and the surviving Zephyrian worlds. The wormhole was shrinking rapidly now, its swirling vortex becoming smaller and brighter as it compressed the very fabric of reality into an infinitely dense point. "All units emergency retreat," Jake commanded, though he knew it was probably too late for any of them to escape. The wormhole's collapse was creating gravitational effects that warped space for thousands of miles in every direction, but Nancy's sacrifice had done more than just trigger the collapse. Her bioenergy had infected the quantum matrix with something the Devourers couldn't consume or understand, the essence of human courage and selflessness. The portal didn't just close, it transformed into something that actively repelled the entities, creating a barrier that would prevent them from ever finding another way to Earth. The wormhole vanished in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen across the solar system. When the energy dissipated, there was nothing left but empty space and the scattered debris of Devourer entities that had been caught in the collapse. The threat that had consumed an entire galaxy was finally contained, trapped in the void between dimensions where they could never